I was 55 years old and on my knees in a grimy highway restroom, scraping dried vomit off a cracked tile floor, when the man in the $3,000 suit walked in. The bleach in my bucket was so strong it made my eyes water. The exhaust fan over my head rattled like it was ready to quit, same as me. He looked wildly out of place in that quick-way station off Route 71. Polished shoes, perfect part in his silver hair, leather briefcase that had never been anywhere near toilet water. He stared down at me and asked, his voice clean and steady, "Are you Evan Porter?" I pushed myself halfway up, rubber gloves dripping the kind of liquid you don't want on you, and nodded. Yeah, that's me. He reached into his case, pulled out a thick envelope and said, "Mr. Porter, my name is Martin Kincaid. I represent the estate of Mr. Charles Porter of Houston, Texas. I've been trying to reach you. Your uncle passed away 2 weeks ago. He asked me to deliver this to you personally." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. My uncle, the ghost relative my father never talked about. The brother who, according to family law, chose money and Texas over real family in Michigan before I was even born. I'd seen him 2, maybe 3, times in 55 years, and both times he'd stood at the edge of the room like a man who'd arrived too late and didn't want to interrupt. "Charles Porter?" I said. The toilet brush slipped from my hand and bounced against the porcelain. "He left me something?" "More than something," Kincaid said, his eyes flicking over the filth on the floor like it might jump onto his suit. "You are named as sole beneficiary. The estate consists of majority ownership in 3 petroleum refineries, multiple producing wells along the Gulf, commercial and residential property across Texas, and a sizable investment portfolio. As of Monday's valuation, the total is just over $340 million. The number didn't make sense. It just rolled around my skull looking for a hook. 340 million. Me. Evan Porter, the divorced janitor whose ex-wife once told him he'd die with a mop in his hands. I dropped onto the closed toilet lid without caring that it was damp. Out front, I could hear my 28-year-old manager, Austin, arguing with a trucker about scratch-off tickets. The fluorescent light above me buzzed and threw a sickly tint over everything. None of it felt real. "There is also this," Kincaid said. He pulled out another envelope, older, yellowed at the edges. My name written on it in shaky loops, Evan. "Mr. Porter instructed me to tell you, the truth I've carried for 40 years is in that letter. Tell him what his father did wasn't cruelty. It was mercy. He wanted you to read it after you were informed of the inheritance. That line hit harder than the money. My father, Leonard Porter, was 78 and living in a care home that smelled like boiling vegetables and disinfectant. He still wore a faded baseball team cap he'd worn since the late 80s and still talked about my mother Ruth, like she'd been carved out of light. He had always said his brother was a man who'd abandoned blood. He had never budged from that story. Now this man from Texas was telling me there was a different version, and that it was written in my dead uncle's hand." Kincaid checked his watch. "Mr. Porter, I have a car waiting. We need to get you cleaned up and back to your apartment to collect belongings. There are officers of the company ready to meet you in Texas. Your life is about to look very different." I stared down at the dirty water in my bucket, at my own tired reflection wavering there. Grey stubble, grooves carved around my mouth, the eyes of a man who'd driven past disappointment and parked in resignation. 3 years earlier, when she rolled her suitcase across our hardwood floor, my ex-wife Sabrina had said, "You are going to die in coveralls, Evan. Some men just never rise." She'd been half right. This version of me was about to die, just not in the way she'd hoped. I peeled off the gloves, let them fall to the floor, and walked out of that restroom behind a man who was carrying a whole different future. Austin barreled down the hallway, red in the face, yelling that I couldn't just walk away from the bathrooms. I didn't even glance back. I had an uncle to bury, a fortune to claim, and apparently a 40-year lie to read. 3 years earlier, I hadn't been mopping restrooms. I'd been the operations supervisor at Midwest Supply Logistics in Dayton, Ohio, 58 grand a year, health insurance, a 4-bedroom in a neat subdivision. A marriage, I thought, stupidly, was unshakable. Sabrina and I had married at 24. We'd done the apartment, the hand-me-down couch, the someday we'll travel talk. I thought we were on the same team. Then corporate restructured, which is just a polite way to say, we found 2 younger people who can do your job for what we pay you. They gave me 12 weeks of severance and a stapled packet called Your Transition Pathway. At first, I treated it like a bump in the road. I had experience. I could run a warehouse blindfolded. Someone would want that. Month 1, I was upbeat. I ironed shirts, rewrote my resume, told Sabrina, companies still want people who actually know how things work. Month 3, I was applying for assistant manager jobs in strip malls. Month 6, the mortgage, the truck payment, groceries, my dad's bills. Everything kept needing to be paid and nothing was coming in. I started delivering groceries at night and cleaning buildings on weekends. Pride is a good meal until the fridge is empty. That's when my cousin Travis started orbiting. Travis with the perfect teeth, the tan from places I couldn't afford, the Rolex he kept forgetting to take off. He'd married money, then opened a string of luxury car dealerships around Cincinnati. He started dropping by with expensive wine and stories about family. Sabrina would light up when his Mercedes turned onto our street. She'd fix her hair, put on perfume. He's just trying to help, she said when I complained. Maybe he can get you on somewhere. I swallowed my pride and asked him. He clapped me on the shoulder like I was already a charity case. You're a solid guy, cuz, he said. But you're not a closer. My guys have to be killers. Sabrina heard that too. A week later, she started working late and coming home smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. When I finally confronted her, she didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't even pretend. She just said, I'm not going to sink because you can't get back up, Evan. Travis makes me feel like I'm worth something. Then she moved in with him before the foreclosure notice even arrived. The last thing she said in our doorway was, you will be cleaning other people's messes before this year is over. So when Kincaid walked into that restroom, I was living out her prediction. Up at 4, 9 to 60 an hour, answering to a kid who talked to me like I was furniture. Studio apartment above Lucky Panda where everything smelled like sesame oil. Every Sunday I'd call Dad and say, still working, Pop. Things are steady, because I couldn't bring myself to say, your son is scrubbing toilets. That's the man that money collided with in that bathroom. The sedan that picked us up looked like it belonged to a senator. The driver in white gloves opened the door like I'd always been important. We stopped at my place. I threw my 2 pairs of jeans, my work boots, the framed photo of Dad, and a shoebox of documents into a duffel. Everything I owned fit in the trunk like it was nothing. Kincaid was on the phone the whole time, calmly arranging a charter out of Dayton to Sugar Land like he was ordering lunch. On the plane, he spread folders on a glossy table. Your uncle started Porter Energy in 1981, he said, bought a distressed refinery, turned it around in 12 months, added 2 more. Never married. Never had children. He earmarked it for you decades ago. He glanced up. He followed your life very closely. He knew about the layoff, the foreclosure, the divorce. He didn't know Sabrina, I muttered. Oh, he knew, Kincaid said, a small smile slipping through the lawyer mask. Which is why he left a specific bequest to Sabrina Lane Porter, former spouse. $1. The note reads, so she's aware I was not fooled. I laughed for real. First time in months. Dead, and he still found time to insult the woman who'd cashed out on me. Houston hit like a wall. Bright sun, heavy heat, smell of oil and salt. We drove straight to the main facility, a maze of pipes, towers, steam and movement. My name, Porter, was on the sign at the gate, 10 feet high. I had to lay my hand on it to believe it. The foreman, a broad-shouldered guy named Duke Ramirez, met us at the office. His handshake could have cracked pecans. "So you're the nephew," he said, looking me up and down. "Your uncle said you were a worker. Said you'd show up ready to listen." "I don't know a thing about running one of these," I told him. 2 days ago I was on my knees in a restroom. But I do know how to ask questions, and not pretend I'm smarter than the people actually doing the job. That earned me the first real nod. "Then we'll be just fine," he said. "Your uncle built this joint on people who show up. That night Kincaid took me to the house. Calling it a house is like calling the ocean a puddle. 15,000 square feet on 50 acres. Fountain out front, oak trees lining the drive, a front door taller than my old garage. Inside, marble floors, dark wood, art, a kitchen that looked like a cooking show, and yet it was all empty. Lived in during the day, unlived in at night." "He stayed here alone?" I asked the housekeeper, a kind woman named Marta. "For 20 years, she said. Staff in the daytime, just him and his television at night. He had pictures of you and your father in his study. He looked at them a lot. In that study, surrounded by awards and oil field maps I called Dad. The TV was loud in the background. 'Hey, Pop,' I said, trying to keep my voice level. 'You sitting down? I heard about your brother,' he said stiffly. 'I'm sorry for your loss.' 'He left everything to me,' I said. 'The refineries, the properties, $340 million. There was such a long silence I thought the line dropped. Then he said, voice tight, 'Well, good. That's good. That's where it should go.' 'What happened between you two, Dad?' I asked. He said he explained it in a letter. He called me, Dad said, suddenly sounding older than 78, said he was finally going to tell you. Just remember I did what I thought was right. Read the letter, so I opened it. The paper was thick, faintly scented. The handwriting slanted like the hand behind it was fighting to stay steady. Evan, it began. If you are holding this, I'm gone, and you have been told what I saved. I wanted you to have it, but I could not leave without telling you why I stayed away. I did not walk out on family because I loved money more. I walked out because your father needed me to be the bad man. 40 years ago, your father and I were both in love with the same woman. You knew her as your mother, Ruth. Your father met her first, brought her to supper, fell for her immediately. I understood why. She was bright and quick and made a man feel 20 feet tall. 2 weeks later, she cornered me and said she had met the wrong brother first. My stomach flipped. My mother, the woman Dad still cried over, said that. I kept reading. I left for Texas to make distance. I worked the oil fields, wrote home, sent money when I could. But Ruth wrote me, again and again, letters telling me she was bored, that your father was safe but small, that with me she pictured a bigger life. I burned every letter. I never answered, because I loved my brother more than I wanted what she offered. Then, when you were 5, she came to Houston, walked into my office in a red dress and the perfume that used to fill your parents' kitchen. She said she was leaving your father. She said she was taking you. She said she would tell him that she and I had been together behind his back for years, unless I did what she wanted. Your mother could be generous, Evan, but when she was crossed, she could be cruel. I told her no. I told her your father was the better man and the better father. I told her you needed him. She said she would destroy him anyway. So I made a bargain. I would go back. I would stage a fight so ugly he would never doubt. that I chose business over blood. In return, I would send her $5,000 every month to stay, to keep quiet, to let your father be happy. She agreed without blinking. She took that money for 10 years, until the day she died. I had to stop and breathe. My uncle had not abandoned us. He had pretended to abandon us, so my father could keep loving a woman who had almost wrecked him. "You were there the night we staged it," he wrote. "You were on the floor with toy cars. Your father yelled that I got rich and forgot him. I yelled that he chose the wrong life. Every word was for show. He never knew I wired Ruth $60,000 a year. He only knew his brother turned cold. I watched you grow from the back row, Evan. I was at the school program where you played the shepherd. I was at the baseball game where you hit the double. I flew up and sat 3 sections over at your high school graduation. I saw the woman you married and knew right away she was cut from the same cloth as your mother. Beautiful, charming, hollow. I wanted to warn you. I could not without breaking the promise that was keeping your father's heart together. When you got laid off, I almost sent money. When the bank took your house, I sat with a check in my hand and did not mail it. I knew if I stepped in, then your father would ask why, and I would have to tell him the truth about Ruth. So I waited until I was dying. Dying men can tell the truth without blowing up lives. There was a darker line near the end, like he'd pressed the pen harder. Do not tell Leonard. Let him keep the wife he loved. Some lies are kindness at the end of a life. Just know I never left you. I simply loved you from a distance. Everything I built for you. As for Sabrina, yes, I left her $1. That one's for me. Use what I left for good. You know what it feels like to be discarded. That makes you the right man. I sat there for hours after that, the Texas evening light sliding across the floor, trying to rearrange every story I'd ever heard about my family. My greedy uncle had been wiring money to keep us together. My angelic mother had nearly blown it all up. My father had walked around for 4 decades, cursing a brother who'd stepped into the role of villain so he could remember his wife as gentle. I called Dad again. "You knew he'd tell me," I said. "I knew," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how much. Are you happy with the version of Mom you carry, Pop?" I asked. "Because there's another." He was quiet a long time. Then he said, "She gave me you. That is enough to make a man happy. Leave the rest where it is. I'm moving you down here," I told him. "There's a place with gardens. You can grow tomatoes again. Your own kitchen. Nurses who actually like their jobs. I can't afford." "I can," I said. "Your brother made sure I can." 3 weeks later, he was in a sunlit apartment outside Dallas, wiping tears with the back of his hand because he finally had a place that didn't smell like mop water. He planted tomatoes. A nurse named Betty bakes him cookies. He tells the same stories, and I let him tell them with a gentle version of my mother in them. When the news hit about the inheritance, Sabrina started calling. First voicemail, sugary. Second, nostalgic. Third through 15th, frantic. One was just her crying. "We can fix it, Evan. We were married almost 30 years. Travis isn't who I thought." When she learned she'd been left $1 on purpose, the last message was nothing but cursing. Travis, ever the image guy, dropped her 2 days later. Last I heard, she was working reception at a dental office in Fort Wayne. I don't hope she fails. I also don't lose sleep if she does. I sold the mansion. It felt like wearing another man's life. I bought a 4-bedroom brick place 10 minutes from the refinery. I kept Duke running day to day because he knows those pipes like I knew my old warehouse. I focused on the thing I understood, people who've been tossed aside. We launched the Charles Porter Training Fund. Men and women over 50 who got chewed up by right-sizing come in, learn welding, electrical, HVAC, plant operations, real skills. We pay them to learn. We place them in jobs that pay real money. Every graduation I tell them I was found in a restroom. You can be found too. Austin, my old gas station manager, applied for a job. I hired him, entry level, answering to Lillian, a 59-year-old former HR director who'd lost her job to automation. First week, she had him cleaning equipment. He shot me a look. I said, "Respect goes both ways." A month later, he came into my office and said, "I'm sorry for how I talked to you." I said, "We're good. Every Sunday I drive to have lunch with Dad. Sometimes Betty joins us. We talk about football and tomatoes and his neighbor's little dog. We don't talk about red dresses and blackmail and staged family feuds. He gets to be old and peaceful. I get to carry the heavy file. When I go back to Ohio for foundation business, I sometimes drive past the old Quickway. It looks the same. Faded sign, bad coffee. There's a new guy in the restroom now, about my age, shoulders rounded, doing a job nobody thanks him for. I handed him my card once. Told him, if you want out, call this number. We retrain people. He squinted at me like I was selling him something. Why would you help me? He asked. Because somebody built a whole life for me from the back row, I said. I.O. This isn't really a story about becoming rich, even though that's the headline. It's a story about how love can look like distance, about how sacrifice can wear the mask of rejection, about a man who let everyone think he was the greedy brother, so his younger brother could die, loving a woman who almost shattered him. If this reached you, if you've ever felt invisible or stuck cleaning up what other people left behind, share it with someone who needs to hear that miracles don't always show up dressed as miracles. Sometimes they walk into the worst bathroom of your life at the exact minute you were sure you were done. Drop your own story in the comments. Tell us about the time help came from nowhere, or when someone loved you quietly instead of loudly. And if you want more stories about second chances, stubborn grace, and the people who choose to care when they don't have to, hit subscribe. You might be one dirty floor away from your turn. Stay standing long enough to meet it.